Breaking news we're following out of the Middle East. Israel's military says Iran launched about 180 missiles at the country today. I'm Tracy Hutchins. For more on the breaking news story, we want to bring in Atlanta News First anchor Carly Barnett. She's at the First Alert Breaking News desk. Carly?
Tracy, tensions are escalating today. Iranian media reports Iran said it targeted Israel in response to the killing of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah and two other leaders. There were dozens of missiles that they say were intercepted, but it's still unclear how many. The Israeli military saying some of those missiles did make direct contact, direct impact in central and southern Israel. We have some really dramatic video. Let's go ahead and bring this up. I was just looking through this. A U.S. official saying military forces in the Middle East are helping with that defense. We have Iranian rockets falling on Israel. And in a statement, the Israel military says the IDF is doing everything necessary to protect the civilians of the state of Israel. The Israeli military said in a statement warning people in the country to stay in those shelters. And U.S. defense officials said the United States intercepted some of the missiles to try to help defend Israel. Iran's mission to the United Nations issued a statement saying, quote, Iran's legal, rational, and legitimate response to the terrorist acts of the Zionist regime has been duly carried out, end quote. There were also, in some other video, fireworks and gun celebrations that were happening in Lebanon after the missile strike, as well as celebrations in Iran after those airstrikes in Israel. At this time, I was looking, there are some conflicting reports about casualties. We will continue to stay on top of this news and bring you the latest.